So you foolishly signed up to a marathon and now you're thinking about nutrition. Everyone recommends that you use gels, but you hate them. What else can you do to get you through the race? Thankfully there are other options, and I'm going to run you through them, and hopefully by the end of this video you'll have some confidence that you can complete a marathon without going anywhere near a gel. So if you're new here, then hey, my name's James and I'm a sport and exercise nutritionist and love doing videos on all sorts of nutrition topics like this. I also do one-on-one coaching and have had plenty of clients in a similar position who just hate using gels. So I wanted to do a video for you to give you some alternative options. And as a quick heads up before we get going, I'm not affiliated or sponsored by any of the brands or products that I mention in this video. Now, I've had plenty of runners ask me whether they really need to eat during a marathon and why it's even important in the first place, and these are fair enough questions. During a marathon you have two major sources of energy, and that's fats and carbohydrates, and you'll use a combination of the two when you run. The average person has around 2,500 calories worth of energy stored as carbohydrates called glycogen, and around 50,000 calories stored as fat. The problem is though that you've only got enough stored carbs for about 90 minutes of hard, steady running, and that's if you're fully stocked up to start with. If you don't consume any carbs during your marathon, then you'll run out of them, and we call that bonking or hitting the wall. You won't be able to run as fast and you'll feel absolutely awful. So you've got this essentially unlimited store of fats and you've got a limited supply of carbohydrates, which means by nature, carbs should be your focus. In addition, for the majority of runners, carbs are the optimum fuel source for performance, which is why the focus should be on carbs during your race. My usual recommendation for carbohydrate intake during a marathon is 50 grams of carbs per hour, but you might need and be able to tolerate more or less than that, and that's individual. You should practice this during your training and see how you get on and whether you need to scale this up or down. So first up on our list of gel alternatives is carbohydrate containing drinks. This is a simple no-fuss option that can definitely get you through a marathon. Marathons should all have aid stations, and they will usually provide carbohydrate containing drinks, so you could get all of your carbs through those. Have a look in the runner's guide, which you should be sent before your marathon, to see what sort of drinks the aid stations provide, how often they are, and how much of that drink you need to consume to hit your required carb amounts. I do usually suggest a minimum of 300 milliliters of fluid per hour during a marathon, but again, you might need and be able to tolerate more than this. You can also use something called a concentrated drink mix, and this is something which I actually really like. In essence, what you do is make a bottle which you carry with you on something like a running belt, and you add in all of the carbohydrates you need into one bottle. This makes it a super concentrated solution, which wouldn't really be useful on its own, but what you can do is just drink plain water at aid stations to basically dilute that solution back to normal amounts. This obviously will vary depending on what your carbohydrate intake goals are, how much you mix in, and then how much you have to dilute to get to your required amounts. But it's a really good solution for some people. This is definitely one that you do need to practice in training to make sure everything around it goes smoothly, but it's definitely a good option. The main limiting factor for the drink-only option is simply how much fluid you're comfortable drinking during a marathon. Because you're going to be getting all of your carbohydrates through this, you have to make sure that you are drinking enough fluid to hit your required goals. And for some people that might mean drinking more fluid than they're happy doing. If that's the case, then you could try number 2 on our list, which is tube locks or bars. These are sport-specific products which are designed to be a bit more firm and sit somewhere between a gel and a bar. These can be a really good option if you don't like gels, but you do need to practice these during your training runs to make sure you're happy chewing them. Now, a notable mention in this category is the Beta Fuel Chews by Science and Sport. Honestly, I think these are a brilliant product and they're easily in my top 3 sports nutrition foods, and they're something that clients have used successfully in the past to run marathons. You can either chew them as you're running, or you can put them in the side of your cheek like a hamster and let them dissolve there, and they can be a really great alternative if you don't like gels. These tube blocks or bars usually come in convenient packaging which is easy enough to open as you're running, and normally they're small enough that you can carry them in your pocket or on a race belt. Next up, we've got dried fruit, and this can be a great option, with some caveats. Generally, dried fruit contains concentrated amounts of sugar, which can be great for hitting your carbohydrate goals. Your options here might be dates, apricots, banana chips, or pineapple chunks. The main issue with dried fruit is that as it's a solid, it's more likely to contribute to gastrointestinal upset. And depending on what you go for, it will contain more fibre. And since fibre isn't digested that well, especially during running, it can cause trouble. The most important thing with dried fruit is to make sure that you practice it during your training, during your long runs, when you're doing race pace intervals, to make sure that you tolerate it well. But for some people, it just won't work. For example, I have a sensitive stomach and I know that I just can't cope with dried fruit when I'm running, and it might be the same for you. Okay, so the next one on our list kind of goes against the theme of this video, but hear me out. My wife hates gels. She hates them for running, she hates them for cycling, she hates them for anything. She hates the texture and the claggy sensation that you get in your mouth afterwards, and the stickiness that you can get on your hands as well. However, she does like the ones by Maurten, and if you haven't tried them, then I would give them a go. Again, I'm not sponsored or affiliated by Maurten. I just think they are a really good product, and they can be great for someone who doesn't like gels. The Maurten gels are kind of like jelly, and they're really neutral in flavour, so if you haven't given them a go, do try them out. Another option for you gel-disliking marathon runners is food pouches. You can buy things like applesauce pouches or honey pouches, and for some people these can work well. They usually contain a reasonable amount of carbs, less fibre compared to dried fruit, and not much in the way of protein or fat. Depending on what pouches you buy, they'll usually contain between about 50 to 40 grams of carbohydrates per pouch, so you probably would need to carry quite a few of them to get you through your marathon. Personally, I wouldn't necessarily recommend food pouches for a marathon because they're a bit of a middle of the road option that don't do one thing really well, but they might be a viable option for you if you just don't like any of the other things that I've mentioned. Now, energy bars could be a great choice if you want something more solid that has a bit of a bite to it. Now, generally I don't recommend solid food during running because it increases the risk of tummy problems, but I know some of you will want it. Sports bars often contain more protein, fibre and fat, which is part of the reason they're more risky. So I'd suggest using bars that have as little of those nutrients as possible. Maurten get another honourable mention here for their solid bar, because it does have a pretty good nutritional profile compared to lots of other sports bars out there. Another one you could go for is the OTE Duo bar, and again, not bad at all. The thing to be aware of with bars in general is that it can be quite difficult to eat them while running. So you will need to practice eating and running and make sure that you get on with it okay. For example, I found the Maurten solid bars a little difficult to eat while running because they were so chewy, but you might be perfectly okay with them. Now, if you've got any suggestions or things that you've tried during a marathon, then let me know in the comments. And here's a couple of other marathon videos for you to go and watch now.